Une autre question souvent posée, et souvent en forme de reproche, c'est de n'avoir pas abordé la question du Proche-Orient avec Chomsky, qui n'a jamais cessé de suivre et d'analyser le conflit israélo-palestinien. En France, comme d'ailleurs aux États-Unis, c'est un sujet qui suscite des soupçons et des passions. Dans les médias, c'est un sujet devenu tabou, complètement instrumentalisé par une véritable terreur intellectuelle, imposée par différents lobbies qui pratiquent l'accusation d'antisémitisme envers toute critique de la politique israélienne. Chomsky a été élevé dans un milieu culturel juif. Dans sa jeunesse, il a même travaillé dans un kibbutz, mais ça n'empêche pas de critiquer la politique israélienne, aussi bien que le soutien des États-Unis à Israël.
Une autre question qui est revenue souvent dans les débats avec les spectateurs, on nous a reproché de ne pas vous avoir suffisamment interrogé sur le Proche-Orient, et notamment sur le sionisme. Les gens disent, Chomsky dit qu'il est sioniste, et d'autres disent oui, mais son sionisme fait qu'aujourd'hui il est anti-sioniste, un sionisme anti-sioniste.
Well, I haven't changed my views, but the term Zionism has changed its meaning. So when I was a Zionist youth activist and youth leader in the 1940s, I was part of the Zionist movement and opposed to a Jewish state. And that was part of the Zionist. I was a Zionist at that time. Well, in 1948, my views, the world changed, so my position changed. I was still opposed to a Jewish state, but I felt that Israel should have the rights of any state in the international system, no more, no less.
Votre sionisme sans Israël, c'était quoi ce sionisme-là?
Well, my actual views at the time were that there should be a binational state based on Arab-Jewish working-class cooperation, which would build on the collective institutions that were being developed on the ground in Palestine. After 1967, I think there was a possibility of bringing about a federal arrangement with a largely Jewish entity, Israel, and a largely Palestinian entity, and that the two of them could, over time, overcome antagonisms and move towards closer integration. From 1975, that position, a version of that crystallized and became the call for a two-state settlement. Now that has become an overwhelming international consensus, including just about everyone, including Hamas, including everyone else. And that has been blocked unilaterally by the United States and Israel. Now today I think the United States should join the international consensus. And my own feeling is that once that stage is reached, it should be possible for the two societies to move towards closer integration. And I think it would be healthy for both of them. Incidentally, I think the same is healthy in most of the world. We have evidence for that right in Europe. I mean, for hundreds of years, Europe was the most savage, murderous place in the world. You know, the highest goal of Frenchmen and Germans was to slaughter each other. In 1945, Europeans realized that the next time they play their favorite game of mutual slaughter, they'll blow up the world. And they're slowly moving towards a more civilized form of integration. And in fact, that has many interesting consequences, such as the growth of regional autonomy, revival of regional languages and cultures, and so on. I think these are generally fairly healthy developments.
Mais pour l'instant, on a un gouvernement israélien qui ne va pas du tout dans le sens que vous souhaitez. Enfin, on a un gouvernement particulièrement dur en Israël.
Well, actually, the dovish administrations are exactly the same. Shimon Peres is regarded as the most forthcoming of Israeli politicians. He was prime minister up until 1996, and as he left office, his last pronouncement was, there will never be a Palestinian state. He was replaced by Benjamin Netanyahu, whose administration was in fact the first to allow for the possibility of a Palestinian state in an interesting way. His Minister of Information was asked, could there ever be a Palestinian state? And he answered, well, we're intending to leave some scattered territories for the Palestinians, and if they want, they can call it a state, or they can call it fried chicken. And a few years later, the Labour Party came to a more or less similar position. The real question is, what is the United States going to do? The United States has overwhelming power. If the United States were to join the world and support an authentic two-state settlement, Israel would have to go along. So the basic problem, I think, is in Washington.
Pas mal d'Israéliens ont un point de vue différent, qui est celui du chien et de la queue. C'est-à-dire qu'Israël a plus de poids sur les États-Unis que les États-Unis n'en ont sur Israël.
That's partially true. If you look over the record on matters that on issues that did not matter much to Washington, Israel gets its way. So, for example, Washington doesn't care much if Israel crushes the Palestinians. On the other hand, on issues that are of concern to Washington, Israel has to back off. Actually, there was many examples, but just to take one recent example. Last summer, right in the middle of the presidential campaign, which is the most sensitive period for candidates, Israel tried to pass through Congress, the Israeli lobby tried to pass through Congress a resolution calling for a blockade of Iran. That's an act of war. And the White House just quietly signaled to them that we're not going to accept that, and it disappeared very quickly. It's important to recognize that what's called the Israeli lobby is just a small part of the pressure to support a powerful Israel. So, for example, the lobby of military industry completely outweighs the Israeli lobby, and they think they love Israel. For one thing, because they can provide it with enormous armaments, which the taxpayer pays for, but also because when Israel is provided with advance arms by the U.S. taxpayer, then the oil producers buy a huge quantity of inferior arms in response. So it's just a bonanza for military industry. Furthermore, if you look at high-tech industry, Microsoft, Intel, Hewlett-Packard, the major centers, they're investing heavily in Israel because it's advantageous to them to have a high-tech, advanced, militarized economy right on the periphery of the major energy-producing region of the world. Israel functions as a military base for the United States. And it's not hidden. Right in the middle of the Gaza war, the Pentagon announced new shipments of arms to Israel. And when they were asked about this, they gave the right answer. They said the arms are not going to Israel. they're being pre-positioned in Israel for the use of U.S. forces if the U.S. undertakes intervention and other actions in the Middle East.
L'existence d'un État palestinien viable, démocratique, n'empêche pas du tout ça, n'empêche pas du tout qu'Israël continue d'être le 51e État.
I agree. But it's just that the U.S. doesn't care that much. If Israel crushes the Palestinians, that's fine in Washington. The Palestinians don't offer anything. I mean, they're weak, they have no support, they have no resources, so it just follows that they have no rights by the most elementary principles of statecraft. The Palestinians don't offer anything. I mean, they're weak, they have no support, they have no resources, so it just follows that they have no rights by the most elementary principles of statecraft.
Est-ce qu'il n'y a pas quelque chose qui est lié au sionisme lui-même, au nationalisme israélien, qui fait que ce petit pays est incapable de vivre normalement, d'être un État normal? Quelqu'un avait écrit un livre qui disait Israël en danger de paix, comme s'il était impossible qu'Israël devienne un jour un État comme un autre.
Sure, it's had that chance for 35 years. I mean, one of the most fateful moments in the history of the region was in 1971. In 1971, President Sadat of Egypt offered Israel a full peace treaty in terms in return for withdrawal from the Sinai. He mentioned the other territories, but didn't care about them. In this proposal, there was nothing for the Palestinians. Israel considered it and rejected it because they were then planning to carry out extensive settlement projects in the northeastern Sinai, as they proceeded to do.
En somme, pour résumer la position de votre gouvernement, vous offrez à Israël un traité de paix contre l'évacuation totale du Sinaï.
Les Israéliens ont demandé un traité de paix. Yaring nous a demandé d'accepter un traité de paix. Nous avons accepté. Mais Israël doit remplir aussi toutes ses obligations dans le cadre de la résolution du Conseil de sécurité, non seulement pour le Sinaï, mais aussi pour toutes les terres arabes.
Cela veut-il dire que vous êtes prêt à reconnaître l'État d'Israël?
En accord avec la résolution du Conseil de sécurité, nous sommes prêts à reconnaître Israël dans les frontières du 4 juin 1967. Telle est la résolution du Conseil de sécurité et nous l'avons acceptée.
Nous pensons que militairement, nous avons déjà une supériorité. Notre problème, ce n'est pas la victoire, mais c'est vraiment la paix même. Nous ne cherchons pas une victoire. Comme je suis convaincu que les Égyptiens ne sont pas besoin encore en défait. Ce n'est pas nécessaire ni pour nous, ni pour eux.
C'est-à-dire que vous pensez maintenant qu'il n'y aura plus la guerre sur la rive du canal de Suez. Vous avez bon espoir?
J'ai un bon espoir, mais je ne suis pas sûr. Dans le Moyen-Orient, il faut toujours garder le doute.
If they had had a peace treaty with Egypt, that would have ended their security problems. But they chose expansion over security, which is not unusual in the history of state. Well, there was an internal bureaucratic struggle in the United States. The State Department thought that they should accept the proposal. Henry Kissinger, who was National Security Advisor, advocated a policy that he called stalemate, meaning no negotiations, just force. Kissinger won. That led to the 1973 war, which was a very close thing for Israel. And after that, Kissinger and Israel were compelled slowly to accept Sadat's 1971 proposal, And finally, that happened at Camp David in 1978. Now, in history, that's treated as a great American diplomatic triumph. In reality, it was a diplomatic catastrophe. In 1978, they accepted a proposal that they could have accepted in 1971, preventing a major war, nuclear alerts, a lot of suffering, but they finally had to accept it. And at Camp David, the U.S. and Israel basically accepted Sadat's proposal. Meanwhile, they were expanding into the West Bank.
Les journalistes et donc des millions de téléspectateurs américains ont assisté à un renversement total de situation. Messieurs Begin, Carter et Sadat, très souriants, se sont longuement congratulés devant les caméras et ont paraphé les deux accords que le président américain venait d'obtenir à l'arraché. Regardons ensemble ce moment historique.
It could be done right today. Because Israel could have security right now if it accepted the current version of the international consensus, the Arab League proposal for a full peace treaty with normalization of relations in return for accepting a two-state settlement on the international border. But the U.S. and Israel do not want that. They prefer expansion to security.